I'm sorry, but we have to talk about the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974 to understand exactly how Donald Trump is going to be able to work with Elon Musk and Doge to wipe out all this insane spending and get around those crazy rulings by those lower court, district court judges who are trying to thwart Donald Trump's effort to reform and destroy, frankly, the deep state. You're not going to want to miss this one in 1 second. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and I'm proud to say the top voice of the Second Amendment in America. Thanks to the 2025 Gundies Awards. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate it. Okay, folks. I hate having to talk about these topics that don't touch on the Second Amendment, but because this is so important to what's going on in the news today, and there's a lot of misinformation and information out there that's not accurate, because some of what we're talking about is so complicated that I feel like I almost have an obligation to kind of convey this information to you to make sure you're the smartest person in the room and you don't get sort of led astray by comments on X or other places that you may be listening to. So I want to talk specifically about how Donald Trump, as the President of the United States in charge of the executive branch, which was created by Article 2 of the United States Constitution, I want to talk about one obvious way for Donald Trump to be able to fix, maybe even permanently, but at least in the short run, through congressional action, this insane spending that we have seen that's been going on with things like USAID and all this other nonsense. Now, before we get into the relevant statute that I'm going to explain to you how we solve the problem, I'm going to explain what the problem is. In a sense, I'm going to give you the headache of the problem that President Trump faces. And then I'm going to give you the aspirin that Donald Trump and Elon Musk and the rest of the Trump team can go about working with Congress to fix. The issue is this. Under the Constitution, you have three branches of government. Article 1 deals with Congress. Congress has the power of the purse. Specifically, spending bills originated in the House. The Senate has to pass it. So under Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution, Congress creates the laws, including laws dealing with spending and the budget for the federal government. Article 2 of the United States Constitution creates the second branch of government, which is the executive branch. The entire executive branch is vested in a single person, in a president. The president, in this case, President Trump, has the full authority of the executive branch. It all vests in him. And then, of course, Article 3 creates the Supreme Court and an inferior courts, and they create the judicial system. So what's relevant for today's conversation is that Article 1, Congress creates the laws, enacts the laws, and then the president enforces the laws. So that gives rise to two concepts that you need to know about. So once you understand that Congress passes budget bills, they pass a law, they say where the money is to be spent, and they say what the law is, it's up to the president under Article 2 of the Constitution to execute on the laws, to enforce the laws, to implement the laws. And then, of course, it's up to the Supreme Court and the courts to interpret the laws if there's a question about what they mean. Now, understand this dynamic between the Congress passing a budget bill and the president enforcing the law. You got to understand one of the tensions going on right now is that Congress over the past few years has enacted a bunch of insane laws dealing with spending of our money, and not just spending of our money, but spending of money we don't even have by borrowing it through the quantitative easing or printing money process, which destroys our wealth and the value of our money by inflation. So the bottom line is Congress passes these crazy spending bills, and now it's up to, under the Constitution, for President Trump to effectuate or execute on these spending laws. Now, Donald Trump and Doge, through Elon Musk and his team, have uncovered what appears to be a massive amount of corruption, fraud, misspending, whatever you want to call it. It all varies. Whatever it is, you've read the papers too. So now Donald Trump needs to figure out what to do about it. Now, in the long run, the right answer, of course, is Congress has to pass proper budgets going forward so that the president doesn't have to effectuate or execute on insane nut job laws and budgets. But in the short run, what can President Trump do now when it comes to these spending bills? And this is where the tension starts. And I'm going to give you the answer in just one second, how this can be fixed. But the tension is this, that Congress enacted these budget bills and these spending bills that are insane. And Donald Trump is saying, I don't want to spend that money because these budget bills are insane. So can Donald Trump, as the President of the United States, take any steps to stop spending the money? Because right now he's basically said, I'm not spending this money. I'm holding it back until I figure out what's going on here because there's a lot of crap going on here and I want to get it addressed. And the answer is we must turn to something called the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974, enacted after Richard Nixon's resignation after the Watergate controversy. Again, the statute in play that we're going to talk about now is the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974. Now, this statute, to make a complicated story easy to understand, this statute provides two sort of competing theories of what the president can do. What it really says is, as a general matter, the president lacks the authority under the Constitution to be able to refuse to spend money that Congress allocates. So if Congress allocates $5 billion specifically to build and to manufacture, 20 F-15 fighter jets, let's say, the president cannot say, I'm not going to do that, because under the Constitution, his authority is to effectuate and to execute on the laws enacted by the Congress. So he cannot just simply say, I'm not going to enforce those laws. I'm not going to spend that money, which when the president does not spend money allocated to him to spend, that is the process known as impoundments. And as a matter of constitutional law, most commentators going back many decades believe, as a general matter, that the president lacks the power to robustly impound the money that Congress has allocated to be spent, because it runs afoul of the separation of powers, that Congress enacts the laws, including spending bills, and it's up to the president to enforce those laws and spend the money allocated. But the good news is there's another part of the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974, other than kind of prohibitions and restrictions on the president's ability to impound money allocated by Congress to be spent. And that is the doctrine of rescission. Now, this doctrine of rescission found in this statute brings great hope and light and possibilities to President Trump and those that want to see a budget balanced, or at least not spent on insane anti-American left-wing propaganda and efforts across the United States and across the globe, for example. And that, again, under this Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974, creates the doctrine of rescission. Now, rescission is a contractual term which we're not going to talk about in this context because we're not dealing with a breach of contract case. What we're talking about here is the doctrine of rescission within the confines of this federal statute. Now, how does this work? Now, to make a long story short, it's actually quite simple. The way the process of rescission works under this particular federal statute is this. If the President of the United States looks at a budget and looks at spending that's being allocated initially by the Congress that's been passed into law, and looks at the budget and looks at the spending and says, you know what, there's a bunch of hooey here. We got to fix this. The statute gives President Trump and all presidents the authority to write a letter, if you will, or a memo or a list that says the following. Here is a list of terrible spending or bad spending or unnecessary spending. Here is the line items. Here are the items. Here's what the purpose is. Here's the amounts. Here's what it's supposed to be spent on. Here's the law that was passed, so on and so on and so on. And create a list of all the craziness. Now, again, what happens after that? The president creates this list and then sends that letter, if you will, to Congress that says, please pass the law of rescission with respect to these items that I've identified in my letter to you, Congress. So if I were President Trump, I would look at every single budget bill being litigated in the courts right now, and I would simply write a letter and identify every single one of them. And then I would identify every single insane program that Doge and Elon Musk have identified, and I'd write that a long, many page list of all these items. What created the law? How much is being spent? Where is it going to? And I would create that list and I would send that to Congress. Now, here's the beauty of this. Y'all know about the so-called the filibuster in the United States Senate, and the filibuster in the U.S. Senate says that it requires 60 votes of the senators to vote to close debate, which is known as cloture, to close off debate on a bill. And if you don't have 60 votes to vote for closing of the debate on a bill, the bill cannot be voted on. And that's why a lot of big legislation gets slowed down in the Senate by the doctrine of the filibuster, because it's very difficult to get 60 votes on a lot of these items because you got Democrats and Republicans. It's almost 50-50 to some degree, right? So you can't get to 60 votes. Here is the beauty of this doctrine of rescission under the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974. It specifically says that you only need a simple majority in the House and a simple majority in the Senate. And because this also deals with specific spending and budget issues, the filibuster cannot be used to stop the process or to prevent this from being enacted. Hear what I just said? The filibuster that stops a lot of substantive legislation in the Senate is not applicable to the doctrine of rescission under this federal statute. And why is that important? Because right now it means that with the Republicans in control of the House of Representatives and the Republicans in control of the United States Senate, they both have more than simple majorities. The Senate doesn't have enough. They don't have 60 Republican senators in the Senate, but they have more than 50. I think they have 53 Republican senators, which means that if Donald Trump sends over the list of spending priorities that he wants cut out to eliminate so he doesn't have to spend and doesn't have to get embroiled with these crazy lower courts, he can send that list to the Congress, and the Republicans presumably have the votes in the House and the Senate to vote in favor of Donald Trump's request of rescission under this federal statute. So this is exactly the process that President Trump, in my opinion, should be trying to deploy line item by line item. Every one of those crazy bits of spending that he outlined in the de facto State of the Union the other night, all the transgender mice stuff, all the spending in countries we've never heard of, all that crap that was talked about, not just at the State of the Union the other night, but also by Elon Musk and all the other things that we've uncovered, including, apparently Social Security money being spent on people that may not even be alive or may not even be in the country. All those things should be listed in extreme detail if it were me advising President Trump, and that list should be sent over to the Congress, asking for the Congress to vote to eliminate the requirement that Donald Trump as president have to spend that money, because that's the issue. Once Congress says, here's $5 billion to buy 20 airplanes, the president, as a general matter, is supposed to spend that money on those 20 airplanes with the money Congress has allocated, even if the president thinks it's stupid. And that is where the tension is right now, that Donald Trump has uncovered all of this shenanigans, these financial games that have been played, but Congress allocated the money, so they're going to court saying, hey, Donald Trump has to spend the money because he's been allocated this by the Congress, and Donald Trump is saying this is hooey, a lot of this is fraud, this is shenanigans, this is not appropriate, this is insane, and that is where the fight is. But the easy solution, since Donald Trump has a Republican control of the House and the Senate, is through using this process of rescission pursuant to this federal statute. And of course, I'm happy to report that I believe, it's my understanding from what I've heard right out of Washington, that there has been discussion with Elon Musk and others in Capitol Hill and in the White House, presumably with the White House counsel's office and others like OMB and the Treasury Department, to say, oh yeah, this can be done. And I hope this does get done, but I wanted you to understand the process of, again, there's the constitutional issue of the president have to spend the money allocated by the Congress because of the Congress creates the law and then the president executes on it or enforces the law. But there is this doctrine of rescission under this one federal statute. And I wanted you to hear it from me so that when you read this in your papers, when you read this on the internet, when you see these debates on Fox News, I might even be on the one on Fox News. You may have to hear this again on Fox News over the weekend. We'll see. But the point is, whether you hear it from me or somebody else, Jonathan Turley or whomever, I wanted you at least to understand the basics because this is a debate that's going to be coming up, and I wanted you to at least hear it from somebody who kind of understands how this works. So there you have it, folks. Hope you learned something here today at the 4 Boxes Diner. Make sure you follow me on X at 4 Boxes Diner. Don't forget to subscribe. We're still trying to get to 200,000 subscribers on YouTube and also trying to build our Rumble presence. A lot of people prefer Rumble to YouTube, and we're trying to accommodate them. And again, thank you very much for tuning in, and I look forward to talking to all of you again very, very soon here at the 4 Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.